Well, we're moving into our parenting conversation today. I have a very beautiful boy, the cutest ever on this beautiful planet, and I had to make a decision.
The cutest ever, where?
Boy, he's cuter than yours.
No ways. No, that can't be.
My son is cuter than your
my
son.
son is very cute. Okay, my son is extremely cute, Benjamin.
Well, I had a situation where the parents came in and our parents were like, hey, look, we're only going to cut this boy's hair at a particular time. And I was like, why? I'm like, do we really believe that? But you know what? I had to just also be in a situation where it's just not what I want. He's not just my son. He's also someone's grandson.
Mm-hmm.
And they also have choices to make about how he's going to be raised, how they're going to also be part of his life. And I diffused my decision to say, okay, I want to cut him as soon as possible. I just think he looks crazy. So my son had patches and patches and patches of hair all over. And then he had these patches of baldness around his head, and I was like, he looks like a cartoon character.
Not so cute anymore.
Yeah, but that's also very interesting. We make choices for children all the time around what happens with their body, whether it's circumcision, ear piercing. There's more things about hugging and kissing. How do we respect a child's rights to their own body while still guiding them safely through the world? We're going to be chatting to this one and speaking to Ayanda Tetyana, who is a parenting expert who helps us all the time on these issues. Welcome back, Ayanda.
Morning to the listeners as well. Oh, this is a lovely topic.
Right.
Yeah, and
we make decisions for our kids all the time, and sometimes they're lines.
Yeah, and it's as simple as the lotion that you're gonna put on their skin, right? It's as interesting as who gets to hug them. It's so simple to a point, like even the clothes that they're going to wear, the older they get, who makes that decision. But some of them are more complex. They're more cultural. But what do we do? Because it's tricky, isn't it?
It is very tricky. I mean, if you understand the psychology behind it, you basically just understand that, you want your child as early as possible to understand that they have right and control over their own body. And this is as soon as, they're able to do little things like run around. There's certain things that we have to get to a point where we even get to that point where we're like, this is like, okay, let me make it a much more practical example.
Mm-hmm.
If you have a 5-6-year-old, at this point as a parent, you shouldn't be the one who's washing their private parts. And that is because you as a parent, you may have all the best intentions when you're doing that. But let's say now comes the caregiver or whoever else. How do you know whether they may be going above and beyond the whole trust and doing what's appropriate with your child?
Yeah.
So when your child is as they grow, you have to give them a little bit more autonomy. And as they develop that autonomy, they understand that this is their body, and then there are things that they are supposed to be comfortable with. What does that look like? And as you're training them for that idea of what is consent, is it okay for me to hug you? Is it okay for me to kiss you? And it's very hard for us to deal with that because we were not raised like that. Auntie would say, "Come, give me a big mwah," and it'd be like,
then it is what it is from that point. Let's backtrack a little bit though, Ayanda. We're speaking about body autonomy, and usually when we use these words or when they happen in society, we're speaking about adults because we think as adults we are grown enough, we're developed enough emotionally and physically to understand our own bodies and have autonomy over it, but we hardly ever have conversations about bodily autonomy when it comes to children. Let's speak about that phrase itself. What does it encompass?
So it speaks to to have control over one's body, basically. So like as the example that I was making, when your child is washing themselves and they're still very young, being able to tell them what is comfortable, where people are allowed to touch them, and just giving them that idea to say, and even your friends, this is an appropriate way to sit on somebody. It's just little things that I think in the past we took for advantage, but because we understand now some of the issues that are happening, especially with the sexual innuendos, that are happening, a little bit of, someone touching someone inappropriately, just leading to so many things. We are now a little bit more careful than maybe we were in the past. And unfortunately, it has to start with you and your child, you teaching them and showing them the things that are okay. And that means sometimes, from the earliest ages, we need to maybe stop washing with our children. We need to allow them to start touching themselves, telling them their body parts as well, and giving them names, the actual name, a vagina, a penis, so that when someone does something that makes our children feel uncomfortable, they're able to tell us that Mang Mang touched me in this way and it made me uncomfortable, and they touched me where exactly.
Yeah, but sometimes it's outside of that space of sexual identity. At times it's just practical stuff that we're used to doing as culture, like ear piercings and cutting of hair. What's your take on those practical things?
I mean, okay, look, as parents, we're always going to have things that we want. I mean, I can tell you now, anyone who's a mother to a girl child, the first thing we want to do is we want to put earrings on there. We want to have the nice hairstyles. And maybe for the longest time, we also have ideas around what their hairstyles should look like up until they start having their own opinions. I really think that is okay, at least until your child starts expressing a displeasure of a particular thing, that we are the ones who have ideas and say, this is what we want to do with them.
Yeah.
I think that is okay, because usually it's just our little, whatever, in terms of our societies, there will be different ideas, earrings. For instance, I know with the little girls, they always have these hairstyles that seem quite a bit tight, but we do that as well. That one until your child says, listen, mom, I don't like this, or dad, I don't like this.
Yeah.
I usually think it's really okay for a parent to decide on that.
All right, let's take a break. Ayanda, stay there on the line. We're speaking about making choices for the little ones. When do we give them space to do so for themselves? At what age? On what decisions do they make? And we've started on that one with our guests. What's your take on it? Go to our X handle and give us your thoughts on our polls. Who do you think should be making that decision? At Channel Africa 1 is the place to go. You'll find our On the Move poll right there, giving you 4 options: the child, the parent, both together. Culture decides. What's your take?
Are you fluent in French, Chinyanja, Portuguese, and Kiswahili? Are you passionate about radio? And are you looking to work in South Africa? Do you have papers that qualify you to work in South Africa? In that case, we might have an opportunity for you to work for Channel Africa. Send us your CV and demo at newsroom@channelafrica.co.za. Remember, if you don't hear from us within 14 days, it means you have not made it or you have not been selected. Channel Africa, the African perspective. Benjamin Moshatama and Palesa on the move.
It's a complicated situation when we're speaking about bodily autonomy for children, because children can't do a lot of things for themselves at birth. So, one would say, what bodily autonomy? Because they can't do anything for themselves. We are literally have to be the ones to make all decisions for our children. But some decisions are aesthetic. Some decisions are for beauty, but some decisions are cultural and traditional or even religious. Where are the lines of bodily autonomy for our children? We're still having this conversation with Ayanda Tetyana, who is a parenting expert. Let's speak about that. How do you categorize the different sections of bodily autonomy for our children? Because there's a huge difference between decisions that are made from a cultural, traditional, or religious perspective. Those are usually imposed on us and passed on from generation to generation. And there are other decisions that we make that are just purely aesthetic, have nothing to do with health, have nothing to do with culture, tradition, or religion, but we make them anyway.
Yeah, so that's a tricky one, because you kind of have to have a balancing act. I would say for a parent to maybe discuss, depending on the child's age, if that practice is reversible, if it's necessary, if it's symbolic, and then hopefully, there is an option for some of these traditions to evolve, especially if it involves, things that are requiring that child to agree or not agree, because remember, as we are moving away, for instance, from our traditional villages, our children come to the township, come to the suburban areas, they may not have the same symbolism or meaning to some of these cultural things that we have. So I'll make an example. In my family, when a biological parent has passed away, we have to shave our heads, right?
Yeah.
And we had a situation where when my father passed away, we all had to shave our heads. But because my son, who's a teen, has these ideas about who he is, he didn't really want to participate in this particular cultural, symbolic. But now we had to really try and sit down and try to explain to him why it's important, what it means to us, and almost try to reach a compromise. But it was really hard, especially for my family, having to try and explain these things to a young child.
And what was the compromise?
The compromise was he has to cut his hair irrespective.
Oh, no. So there was no compromise.
There's no compromise there.
And that's the thing, right? Because sometimes as parents ourselves, like in the primary unit, like the primary caregivers of the child, we can make decisions for ourselves. Maybe we can move away from those cultural and traditional norms and say, yeah, I'm going to be a little bit more forward thinking about how I make decisions for my child. But we are Africans. We're not just part of one primary unit. We're part of a bigger unit where our practices are upheld in those units. So you go to your child to a traditional thing and they say, yay, this child must cut their hair. And whether or not you've been forward thinking in the primary unit, you yourself as the parent is also a child in that situation.
Exactly. So let me just say the compromise was with some of the things that we have to eat as part of the symbolic culture. He refused that because he's very fussy about stuff that he eats and the texture of food, but he had to cut his hair. But I can tell you it was a lot of work getting to that compromise even. But I'm just saying that it's important that we have these conversations. We try to explain to our children why these things are symbolic and meaningful to us. You know, even in situations where we don't necessarily understand what we're doing, like you mentioned, some of us, we also children in doing things that we don't necessarily understand, but because this is part of what our family is, the traditions that have been implemented in the family, that's the continuous conversations that we are talking about, and the identity that says this is the people that we are, this is the practice that's been done by our families, and we just keep doing it. Sometimes it doesn't make sense, but we have to do it.
Yeah, it's so interesting that we're having these conversations because indirectly, I know I style my son like I style myself. And it's going to be devastating, Ayanda, one day when my son doesn't want to be styled the way I dress him and maybe wants a pink trouser instead of a blue one, right? And those are things that I think sometimes we should allow these young ones, the older they get, to really establish their own choice and also express their own individuality outside of ourselves. Because I know I'm projecting, right? And I know I'm doing it because that's how I like things, right? But there's going to be a time when I have to let my way go.
Yes, absolutely. So obviously as our children grow, their cognition, their emotional maturity, they'll feel like I don't necessarily look nice like that. Or maybe some child at school tease them and they'll start having ideas about how they want. They also watch social media and they will have an idea of what's cool, which may not be necessarily what daddy prefers. So I think this is where it's so important that we understand that in their growth, their voice is so important, and the voice works in so many ways in the long run, but it starts, unfortunately, with us. It starts with them expressing things with us, but in the long run, it's your son being able to speak to their friends about things that they like, that they don't like. It's your son being able to speak to their intimate partner in the future and say, listen, I don't like that doesn't work for me. It's your son being able to stand up for themselves in the workplace and say, this does not suit. But where does it all start from? It starts from them having this little voice. And unfortunately, these are these little things that we have to balance and say, this is not that important that he looks like me. What's important is that he's expressing what is important to him.
Well,
and
Ayanda,
allowing that.
there might be a parent listening to this right now who's never really thought about the bodily autonomy of their child. And they're like, well, this is something I would like to implement. What's the decision-making process on each individual thing where you think to yourself, okay, in this particular instance, is this something that I should impose as a parent because of its importance, or, maybe the health or the religion, etc.? Or is this something that I should allow their own autonomy on? How do we juggle that decision-making process?
I mean, just start as with the most safest things, like, dressing, grooming, allowing them, and then grow that obviously to things like giving them the right to say, do they prefer to hug granny? Do they prefer to give granny a high five? And then communicate within your own circles that, listen, my child is more comfortable with that, so that they don't shame and say, hi, but why when you don't want to be hugged when all the other kids want to be hugged? It's really just allowing our children to get to a point where that voice is given a platform to say, how do you feel? And I know when we have to get ready for things, or we're in the middle of doing things, it's very hard to have spaces to really sit down and really listen to our children. Yeah. But as I mentioned, the importance in the long term.
Yeah.
So what I always say, Palesa, the best way to know if you're being the best parent in the whole world is to be responsive to your individual child's needs. You can have 5 children. They're not going to all want the same things. Listen to each and every single one of them and respond as per the demands. They're just never going to be the same in what they require from you.
Well, honestly, I don't think that exists. I don't think the best parent in the whole world exists, but we're all doing our best, Ayanda.
Yeah, we're winging it.
We're just winging it, and we're trying our best. And more than anything, really quickly before we wrap up, the benefits of a child understanding their own autonomy, especially in the complex world that we live in.
For me, it's so important, because then it speaks to all those peer relationships, the future relationships, and someone who's able to say, I'm uncomfortable with this. Someone who's able to understand consent, because once you are given the platform to know consent for yourself, you will be easily able to understand when someone else says no, and when someone else says, don't touch me like that. So it's just really playing with those two, understanding that we live in a world that a lot of things happen that we're very uncomfortable with. If your child is able to see when something like that happens, and they're able to say, I'm not comfortable with this.
Yeah.
No, you're like halfway there through the journey of getting our kids to the next level at this particular stage which we live in.
I love that. It's always a pleasure to chat to you, Ayanda. Thank you so much for your time. That's parenting expert Ayanda Tetyana speaking about the bodily autonomy of children.